What happens when great leaders step down? The answer lies not just in who comes next, but in the legacy that they leave. Let's dig in today. Welcome to Transformation Station. I'm your host, Adrienne Benson, and today we're talking about those twins, succession and legacy. These are inseparable forces that shape families and businesses and even nations. Succession ensures continuity while legacy defines meaning. Well, today I'm super excited because we have an awesome guest. He's an expert. Let me tell you a little bit about him. His name is Mark Vincent. Mark Vincent EPC partners with accomplished third-turn leaders committed to developing the current and next generation of effective leadership. He is a strategic advisor to valuation of firms, a certified executive process consultant, and a My Grow partner for North America, helping individuals and organizations grow in emotional intelligence and mission effectiveness. An executive advisor, author, systems convener, and succession process consultant. Mark loves leaders who love leaders. And Mark, we're so excited that you are here today with us on Transformation Station Vital Conversations. Welcome.
Well, thank you. And I love the energy you're setting the stage for both of us to have a great conversation.
Absolutely. Okay. So when we think about leadership, many times I find that we often focus on growth, on vision, and the impact that we're making right now, right? We celebrate what a leader is doing today, everything that's happening in the present. But, Mark, I found over the years that leadership isn't just about what's happening while we're in the seat, it's also about what happens after we leave. So I want to start off by asking you this question. Okay. When you think about leadership succession, what do you believe most organizations get right? Or actually, let's ask it this way. What do you believe most organizations get wrong or overlook entirely?
Thank you for that question. Uh, the the statistics tell us that most organizations do get it wrong, do
Hmm.
not get the value that they want. So in starting a business, most of them fail.
Mm,
In handing a business off to a next generation or just selling the business and trying to achieve a certain value, an economic value, maybe even a personal value, most of the time it doesn't happen either. Do mergers, do acquisitions, do they get the value? Most
mm,
of them don't. Those that do get the value do it spectacularly
mhm,
and tend to make others of us say, well, then let's do it. Let's see if we can do it. Well, what
mhm,
they get right is they are planful. They are very much three-dimensional. Looking at what we're doing right now has that long term in mind. So they are keeping a depth perception between now and the not yet. They're not just exclusively focused on now and losing track of the not yet. So what do
mhm,
they get wrong? What do most organizations get wrong? They're not
mhm,
looking long term. They're
mhm,
actually quite willfully, sometimes intentionally saying, we're not going to think about the long term. We're just going to think about right now. Change is constant. We're going to just do whatever we've got to do in the moment. What did we do this month, by the way? Did we make money today? Those are great questions, but in light of where you want to be long term in the value that you want to achieve. And so most organizations aren't doing that. They're thinking much more in the right now, the much more immediate, without reference to where they
mm.
want to be long term.
Talk to us about that last line you said. They're thinking about the immediate without reference to where they want to be in the long term. Let's stay right there for a moment. Talk to us
Sure.
about that.
Well, most organizations have done some kind of exercise around mission and
Mhm,
vision and values. Maybe they're even getting to strategy and goals. And a lot of times the mission and the values might be enshrined on the wall or walls all
okay.
throughout the company.
Mhm,
Any meeting room, there they are, they're hanging there.
mhm,
And the decisions that are being made and the conversations that they're having, they're not bringing those into the conversation. They're hanging on the walls, maybe, but it's not operable in the conversation. Hey, if our values are X, Y, or Z, or if this is the strategy that we have in place, or if this is our long-term mission, how does that affect the decision we're looking at now to make this capital investment, to hire the next 5 people, to launch this new innovation? How is that helping us do that? And often that is not the referent. The referent is the plan, the annual plan, budget. Is there money available? Does it fit with what we've agreed to do? Hey, I got an allocation last year, didn't get one this year, but everybody else did. When do I get my allocation? And the conversation does not keep going back to this is who we said we were and will be, and this is how we make our decisions. When those come into play, that planfulness, that directional kind of next step starts to emerge. Otherwise, we're flailing around trying to manage the present, trying to remain profitable, trying to keep things operable. And then we start to think that long-term planning is a luxury. It's a perk. It's when we start to succeed that we can get there. And I'm just maintaining that success happens when we're keeping that long-term in mind.
I love that. I love that. Absolutely. So here in Transformation Station, as we have our podcast, we always give our listeners and viewers an opportunity to stop and to reflect. And so those of you who are watching and listening right now, I want you to really stop and hone in and reflect on what Mark has been sharing with us, right? He talked about one of the things that organizations get wrong is when they're focusing on the right now, they're not focusing on the long term, they're focusing on the short term. Ask yourself as a leader, what is the culture in which you're leading? Are you focused on who can fill this seat right now? Are you focused on who can complete this mission right now? Or are you focused on the long term, right? And we're going to talk about legacy a little bit later on. And Mark, I want to ask you this question. So how do great leaders, right? Because here in Transformation Station community, we're talking to leaders who've been in leadership between 5 and 25 years. Most of them have some sense of experience, and many of them are high driven leaders. And so we're going to ask it from this viewpoint. How do great leaders, how do we begin preparing for succession before it becomes urgent, before it's something that I have to do? How do I as a leader start to prepare for succession?
I have a hunch that in our conversation today, we'll have some simple kinds of things that we talk about. Simple to hear, simple to say, very, very difficult to do because they require discipline. They require getting up every day and repeating and doing it again. The lifelong learning phrase that we say all the time. I'm a lifelong learner. Lifelong learning matters. Well, let's just underline it, put it in red, and say, yes, it does matter. Those leaders that you're asking about, if they're getting into the 20 and 25 years and beyond of leading and growing the whole time, they didn't get there because they just kept doing what they know how to do. They are getting there and growing their companies because they continue to learn. They became leaders. They were either appointed as leaders or they were able to get people to trust them enough to make an investment in the company they wanted to start because they were learning, they were figuring things out. In order to keep running a company, keep making the changes, keep focusing on that long term, using the short term because you have urgent matters, but using that short term to not forget about the long term, to take your next step toward the long term, to do all of that, you continue to learn. If you start to say, okay, now this is about succession, and I often say it's about business continuity and succession because they go together. So if that's what we're going to focus on, well, then we have to learn because I've not done it before. I've gotten all of my success, these kinds of leaders might say, because I became a student of the moment. I went and got help. I didn't start from, I know stuff. I'm competent. I have to outperform everybody. They gather insight, they get expertise, they surround themselves with the people who can help them get there. They draw on that expertise, they help to coordinate some things, but they keep learning. They start from I don't know, so let's figure it out.
I love that. It was something that you were saying, you kept saying I, and we find that when leaders are not succession or legacy focused, it's very one-centered focused. what I
Mhm.
can do, right? What one person can do as opposed to what we can do, and how do we leave continuity for greatness to still continue to happen. I also want to recognize that, when we're talking about preparing for succession, it's really important that as a leader that we invite open dialogue within the culture that we are working in, right?
Mhm.
When you have that open dialogue, then the team gets an opportunity to talk about the future, plans, the needs with honesty. There must be a sense of transparency in that conversation. So let me ask you this, right? As a leader, we find ourselves always wrestling between the tension, and wrestling not in a negative way, but navigating through the tension of leading and managing. And sometimes we get it a little confused, right? So, from your expertise, what's the difference between leading and the difference between managing?
Yeah, I like the question. So let's start with an assumption that leading and managing are not divorced from each other, that they are entirely separate and completely distinct categories. There's some significant overlap. So, if you're going to be a strong leader, there's going to be some management or managing aspects to it. And if you're going to manage something, there will be leadership aspects to it. So, here's how I like to work with it. I like to think of management as taking care of current value, growing current value, expanding, making more effective, making it leaner, adding more margin. You keep growing what already exists. You are taking care of assets and capital that's in place and the talent that's in place. When you are leading, you are moving and beginning to face the future, and you're going toward future value. You're now starting to describe something that does not exist yet, could exist, trying to see if there are others who can get their minds around it and add to it. So it starts to become a thing that emerges out of the mist.
Mm-hmm.
Very few organizations are going to exist in 10 years doing exactly what they do now, managing it very well.
Mm-hmm.
That management will help spin off some cash, some capital. It'll grow talent that helps you face to the future where you got to extract future value, a new product mix, an innovation, an entirely new business. And I often talk about Apple as a great example of this because they start out with the personal computer, the little one, and then they move over to music in your pocket, and then it becomes telephones, that become smartphones, that become your little personal handheld computer that does everything, including telling you where to turn when you're driving. And over time, they will have to do yet something else. Their major value came from something that they were working on into the future. And if they don't do that again with smartphones becoming ubiquitous and ever cheaper, then Apple will lose its place in the marketplace. And most organizations do. So, one more quick way to describe this, Adrian.
Mm-hmm.
If you take the top, like the Fortune 25, just take the top Fortune
Mm-hmm.
companies from 25 years ago and look at it today, it's
Mm-hmm.
almost a complete turnover.
Mercy.
Right? And why is that? That's because the value that they were receiving 25 years ago is not the value that's
Right.
driving in the marketplace now. And the
Correct.
companies that have continued and are still present merged with somebody, bought
Mm-hmm.
somebody, or completely changed what they do.
Mm-hmm. 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 Absolutely. I'm pausing because I want to give our viewers and our listeners an opportunity to stop and think, right? Mark is dropping some serious gems, and I want you to apply it to your current leadership situation, circumstance, season that you're in. So you talked about value. How do you define future value?
Hmm. Well, I'm going to use a double negative. It
Mm-hmm.
cannot not include money. It's going to
Mm-hmm.
include money. I
Mm-hmm.
often have people who immediately object and say, I don't want to be all about getting money. I don't want to be all about, it's not just about money. You're right. It's not just about money, but money's going to touch everything
Correct.
that you value. So,
Correct.
what are some of those other things? Well, future value is, I would hope, are items that are good for humanity, not
Mhm.
that take away or that harm humanity. Because if you get value, but humanity is harmed because of downstream effects of what you sell or what you make, then
And
that's
that's
not really future value. It's
correct.
taking from the world instead of adding to it. So, it's
Mhm.
going to bring hope, it's going to bring prosperity, it's going to bring creativity, it's going to
Mhm.
add a quality of life in some way. And right when I start to talk about quality, I'm no longer talking about quantity. So it's not just
Mhm.
the money that makes it possible, it's what it can make possible. And then beyond that, you have talent.
Mhm.
People who are empowered, who are schooled, who are able to understand what wisdom is, stand on the shoulders of the wisdom that precedes them so they can build instead of having to clean up the deficits that were
Mhm.
created before
Mercy.
they came on the scene. Those are the kinds of things that I would describe as value. And if we want to make it even simpler, I would say value is rated is rooted in being creative. It's
Mhm.
creating something. And we
Mhm.
tend culturally and politically to get into a debate between consuming and conserving. Well,
Okay.
conserving, you're protecting things and you're
Mhm.
managing them very, very well, but they get smaller over time to help you manage them well. If
Mhm.
we're consuming, we're saying zero sum game. Adrian, I got to get it before you get it. You've got some fame,
Mhm.
you got some notoriety, or you got the job, or you've got a nice house. I need to get some of that. And it becomes all about what I can take.
Mhm.
And I'm suggesting that future value is not rooted in either of those. It's
Mhm.
rooted in creating,
Mhm.
adding, uh,
Mhm.
designing together. And as we do that, sometimes, yeah, it'll consume a resource, but we want it to produce other resources and more than makes up for what we have to consume to produce it. Do we want to
Mhm.
take good care of things and manage them well? Yes, but to the end of creating and offering and building for others who come after us.
So it's not just about the short-term results. It's about the seeds that we plant now that shape culture, capacity, and opportunities of the future. And I think this is a
Right.
really important point to really stop and hone in on, right? Because as leaders, we are fortunate to be in positions not just for today, but for tomorrow.
Yes.
And
Right.
so it's imperative that we allow there to be a prioritization of future value, right?
Yeah.
To the
Yeah.
leader who is out there right now, I want you to think about what are the seeds that you can plant now that will shape the culture, the capacity, and the opportunities of the future for you and for your organization. I
Yeah,
love
and at the end of things, it's going to be your relationships. That's where the
Yes.
value really shows up. Your money doesn't sit at your bedside and hold your hand when you're ill or have to rehabilitate or are dying.
Mm,
Your relationships do. And
mhm,
what our relationships build upon is built upon bringing value for others, adding hope, adding things in their life that you do together. It's not just giving
mm,
gifts and hoping people will be nice to you in return as long as you keep giving. There's going to be a moment you can't give. And so
mm,
when you are in the receiving mode, you are receiving out of gratitude and out of loyalty and out of the kindness, the loving kindness that you've helped to bring to the world.
I love that. You know, one of the challenges that many leaders face is what you just talked about, being in receiving mode. Many
Oh,
leaders
yeah.
don't know how to receive. And I think it's because of exactly what you're talking about, right? If we are not posturing ourselves in a mode for future value, right? For
Hmm.
opportunities to be created, right? Then we hold ourselves back from being in a posture where we can receive with authenticity.
Yeah, we isolate ourselves. We think we're all alone and nobody understands. We
Yes.
get self-protective, and then it sounds remarkably close to whining at that
Mm,
point.
mercy. It's so true. So
Yeah.
true. So I have a reflection question for our listeners. What's one action you could take this week that won't pay off today, but
Hmm.
will create meaningful value a year or even 5 years from now? I want to invite you, as always, take out your journal, your pen, your pad, your laptop, write down that question and answer it. And be sure to discuss your answer with another leader. And here's one more piece of practical advice, right? Start by looking at where your time and resources are going. If 100% is spent on urgent needs, you're not building future value. I want you to
Beautifully
hear me and
said.
Mark as we talk. Hear us as we talk tonight. All right. Where is your time and your resources going? Because again, our conversation tonight is about setting in motion today what will allow you, your mission, and your organization to thrive for years from now.
Mhm.
So, Mark, I have to ask you this question, right? Again, based on your experience, what qualities should we look for in someone who is ready to step into a legacy role? And how can leaders nurture? How can we as leaders nurture these qualities in others?
I think I had said earlier on that sometimes these responses will sound simple, but they are pretty difficult to live into, and it just takes rigor. It takes a commitment and constant practice of them. We've already talked about lifelong learning. That striking that approach that there's something for me here to learn. That is a very distinctive quality, and I'll add to that by saying it's not just lifelong learning; it is leaning in to that learning instead of being detached, removed, observing from a distance, and not engaging with the business, engaging with people, rolling up your sleeves, getting your fingers and hands and maybe even your feet dirty as you're doing that work together. So leaning in matters. And what I've learned to do when I'm invited, and this happens fairly often, to meet with senior leaders, emerging leaders, especially people who are moving into the C suite, what I begin to watch for is, do they actually lean into their learning? And there's a threefold way to assess this as you're in conversation with someone. I'm not grading them, I'm just listening. So a lean in person is asking questions. And when they're asked questions, their responses start to move from short to long term. They're thinking about mission and vision and values and how it reflects on their choices, and they're wrestling with the ramifications of things. They're curious. When they're leaning away, we recognize that pretty readily. Arms get crossed, defensive posture in some form. They ask challenging questions, hard questions. They say it won't work. They say, well, we tried that and, everybody refused it, or that was my idea 5 years ago. Why should I help now? You can really feel that. But I'd like to suggest that someone who's demonstrating that kind of resistance, they're at least clear. They're right out in front. They're being honest. And you can ask some questions, and quite often you can actually get around that and gain back their curiosity and readiness to lean in and to begin to trust the process. Where
Mm,
it's difficult and where it's hard, and this is what I'm watching for, is this pretending to lean
mm,
in. And I
mhm,
sometimes model that. If you're listening to it, you can't see what I'm going to do with my hands, but if I put a hand in your face, Adrian, like I'm resisting you, and I'm also beckoning you to tell me more, I am giving you two messages at the same time. I'm holding you at a distance and I'm saying, can you say more about that? Or what's your favorite book? Or do you have recommendations for me? Or what does that mean exactly? Or, how might that work? How would that play out? What ideas do you have? I'm pretending that I'm connecting, but I am keeping
mhm,
a distance to protect myself. I'm
mhm,
playing a game. I'm wanting to look like I'm curious, but I'm scared of what this could mean. I'm acting in self protective ways. That person who's defensive, they're not protecting themselves. They're throwing it out there. They're bleeding on the floor. I'm against this. I don't see why it would work. So,
mhm,
what you listen for is that person, first and foremost, who engages with the conversation, who
mhm,
wants to get into solutioning with you, wants to
mhm,
go study, wants, they're not saying, well, what book would you recommend? They've already read a book, or they're
mhm,
already looking for one, or they're going to read five, or they want to
mhm,
know who else can they talk to. There's a hunger to
Mm-hmm.
gain something, and starting from, I'm showing you I don't know, that's why I'm asking my questions. That's leaning
Mm-hmm.
in. And
Mm-hmm.
that is the kind of leader that we're looking for. They may not even describe themselves as a leader, but
Mm-hmm.
they are moving to assimilate information and begin to put it to use, as opposed to only thinking about how am I going to appear.
Mm. Keep talking. Like I'm listening. I'm pleased. Give us a few more minutes of this. I'm listening.
Well, I
Mm.
don't have a whole lot more, because that's really where it
Okay.
starts as a key quality. Is the person
Yes.
engaging in their learning, or are they
Yes.
resisting it? And
Yes.
learning to recognize that when you're the leader of a system, a company, an enterprise, a nonprofit, an NGO, when you're leading and you've got to find talent surrounds you, think of all the wasted time and money with the people who are resisting but pretending to lean in. The
Mm-hmm.
person who's resisting, you can deal with it. They're either going to exit, or they're going to have a turnaround and join in because they learned to trust it again. But that
Mm-hmm.
person who's playing that game is going to make you have to have multiple conversations, check ins 3 weeks from now, and it will keep getting punted until they can find a way to look good and take credit for what they've delayed and obfuscated because they're afraid. Now, I want
Mm-hmm.
to have compassion for those people. And I'm learning over time to better identify it, to better name it, to better invite them to lean into that learning. And it also means I've had, because I've learned to do this more effectively, to sit down with senior leaders and say, you've got 2 out of your 5 or 1 out of your 8 or something that is not leaning in. And you're going to have to decide how long your patience runs for them to make their choice.
Mm. I love that. I love that. So again, Mark has shared so many rich gems with us, right? He talks about lifelong learning and leaning in. He gave us examples of what it looks like for somebody who is leaning in and what it looks like for someone who is not leaning in. And as you were talking, I was thinking about this, leaning in, right? That is someone who is exhibiting character, capacity, and commitment. So if
Yes.
you're a leader and you're looking at your team and you're saying, who can I on my team journey with when it comes to succession and legacy? Well, you're looking for someone, as Mark said, who's leaning in, right, with their character. They have integrity. Somebody who's leaning in with capacity. Mark talked about they are learning, they're hungry for learning, and they have self initiative, right, and commitment. They're here, they're all in, right? You don't have to pull and tug to get them to be a part of team meetings or a part of the project to work with the team. And as we talk about nurturing, so Mark, if I'm this leader and I've identified some individuals on my team who have who are modeling succession and legacy abilities, how do I nurture them? Well, one of the things that I think about is creating a feedback culture
Mm-hmm.
where these individuals have an opportunity to have a voice, right?
Mm-hmm.
They have an opportunity to reflect with the team, with you as a leader, right? They have an opportunity to adjust. Like, nobody's perfect, right? But
Right.
we're always growing. We can nurture it by giving them opportunities to stretch. I know sometimes stretching is uncomfortable. It is for me. But I tell you, I appreciate those leaders who allowed me to get in there and get my hands dirty. They allowed me to scrape my knee a little bit, but they were right there to give me that rubbing alcohol to put on it, right? They gave me these stretching assignments because,
Right.
as I've looked at my own opportunities and abilities through the years to promote, to move forward, Mark, it wasn't the comfortable times that allowed me to really learn what I needed for the next level of responsibility. It was those hard times. It was those times where I had to dig in deep and make the decision that I was not going to quit, that I was going
Yeah.
to figure it out. Those were the assignments and the times that allowed me to develop my competency and my character so that as the promotions came, I was prepared in many ways for that next level because I had those stretch assignments. And to those leaders who are listening right now and you're watching and you're analyzing and you're assessing and you're identifying people on your team, don't be afraid to give them opportunities to learn and grow.
Mhm.
You don't have to do everything for them, But teaching is also mentoring and coaching. It's not doing, right? Mark, I feel like you want to say something.
Oh, no, I'm mostly just saying amen and keep going yourself. That whole thing of learning alongside, investing alongside, means you can't be just head down in the business as a leader. That would make you more of a manager. You'd be taking care of current value, current tasks, administrating things. That is a function in a business, but that is not the executive function of the
Mhm,
business. The
mhm,
executive function is to do complex problem solving, which involves capital and facilities and marketplace stuff, and it involves the talent that's going to address them. You have to be able to
mhm,
have your head up and see them and get an ability to touch the business and touch that person's
mhm,
life at the appropriate moments with an
mhm,
appropriate kind of challenge in order to be able to be supported while they're doing a hard thing they've never even tried before and finding
mhm,
out that they can do it. Well, that
mhm.
means you have to have a viewpoint. You have to have a perch from which you can see the
Yes,
vista and how
yes,
those people are going to help achieve that future value that's
yes,
needed. And that means you have to create the margin in your life to be able to see it so that you can spend
mhm,
time with those
mhm.
people that you want to pull into their own leadership, because
Yes,
that's where legacy starts. It's not just succession, it's the ability for there to be continuity and for the enterprise to have a reason to keep going under the leadership of others that you've
yes.
helped to prepare.
Yes, yes. I keep hearing this word awareness. And, as a leader,
Mm,
we must be self-aware, right? To thine own self
yeah,
be true. I have to be able to lead myself before I can lead you, right? And
right.
then we need to be culturally aware, aware of our environment, aware of the people that we work with, their gifts, their talents. We have to take that time as a leader to get to know our people. And so we have a reflection question for our listeners right now. Who in your circle shows the seed of these qualities that you've heard Mark talk about? And how can you, as a leader, water these seeds this week so that these individuals that you recognize can grow into a leader who carries the legacy forward? I want to invite you, write this question down, stop, think about it, and really answer it. If you can't answer it right now, that means that when you go to work tomorrow and the rest of this week, you really got to take some time to stop and look, be aware, be quiet. You know that word listen, Mark, is the same letters for silent, right? Sometimes be quiet as a leader. Just
Yeah,
be in the room, but watch, just watch. You'll be amazed what you find out, what you recognize, what you identify when you just step back and you
yeah.
watch and you listen. Okay. I have two more questions for you.
All
Two
right.
more. Okay. So personally integrated. Talk to us a little bit more about what it means to be personally integrated.
I think that's my favorite question that you just
Mhm,
asked me for this interview, because it not only provides something for how I would map my own development, but if I am
mhm,
invested in loving other leaders, helping to develop them, it gives me a map for how I
mhm,
might work with them. Let's
mhm,
start just for a moment with the emotional intelligence conversation. So if I am self-aware so that I can actually be aware of others, now I can be aware of my impact on others as they are becoming self-aware. And that's where there's a lot of work to be done. Folks are not coming to the workplace well formed as an integrated person because of what their childhood was like, or the community that raised them, the village that surrounded them. It's actually a beautiful thing when a child comes into adulthood and they've got a rich history of mentoring, being mentored, of being gifted by their parents who loved them and stayed together and created a unit. More and more, we're seeing people who the normal story is emotional abuse and
mhm,
not being completely formed. They've got some skills tied to work and knowledge, with the ability to work with other humans well, especially ones they don't know. They really struggle. And so the best companies, the best practices for companies like this is to say, we've got to build this now into our onboarding. We have to
mhm.
help them become aware, and we have to help them develop not just their work skills, but their human skills.
Skills.
Well, then
Mhm,
now we're to this question that you've asked. What does it
mhm,
mean then to say, oh, this is a skilled human? This is an integrated human. I'll go this way. If we're compartmentalized rather than integrated,
Mm-hmm.
we're responding to crisis.
Yes.
We kind of balkanize ourselves. We spread things out in order to protect ourselves if we sense that death is imminent, tragedy is coming, financial crisis is here. We set aside our emotions. We grin and grit and bear down and see our way through this, and we'll deal with that stuff later because we're triaging. There's an
Correct.
emergency. We got, am I going to eat today? Are my kids going to eat today? We're not thinking about a retirement plan when we're
Mm-hmm.
thinking about the next meal.
Mm-hmm.
When we've lived that way for a long time, it starts to feel normal.
Mm-hmm.
And we have many people who are responding to non-stressors as if it is a stress. So they go
Mm.
into a meeting and they get a piece of critical feedback or whatever, and they act like they're being attacked, like they're going to be killed. Or they
Mm.
respond in fear and run away and hide. Or I've been learning more from Dr. Mira Brancu about fawning as another stressor response. I'm now going to be nice to you in an insincere way because I don't want to be an object of this stress. So at that
Mercy.
point, we're compartmentalizing, and we're either giving into our emotions or our thoughts or physical desires without them all working together to support us. So
Mm.
I tend to like the map of heart and soul and mind and strength as
Mm.
one way to understand what integration is. Heart, my emotional center; mind, my intellectual center; strength, my physiology, my body battery, the way
Mm.
I consume and make sure I've calories and make sure that I'm restored and have rest, proper diet, that kind of thing; physicality. When all of those are working together and my emotions and my desires are supporting my thoughts and my thoughts are helping me make wise choices, then my soul gets involved. I start to
Mm.
have perspective. I'm able to think long term. I'm even able, as the teacher says in the book of Ecclesiastes, to have eternity fixed in my heart. I can see a couple of 100 years into the future and consider possibilities for my grandchildren's grandchildren and beyond. Now, I have grandchildren, and I can imagine them becoming grandparents. I can
Mhm.
imagine what's the world I want them to have for their grandchildren. That's my
Mhm.
soul starting to
Isn't it?
speak. And then my emotions are in support of it. And I think about the possibilities, and then I expend my calories, my life. I choose my activities with that in mind. So, one of the things I do when I start to feel stress, to try to not get compartmentalized. I mean, it is appropriate to say, hey, is this a dinosaur? Is this a lion? Is it going to eat me? But if it's not those things, then, oh, take a breath, take a
Mhm.
drink of water, stop for a second, gather myself, deep
Yes.
breath, exhale. All right. What, for me, this is the order I use. I think different humans need different order for these questions, but the questions all work. I start with, what am I feeling? What's the
Mhm.
actual emotion, so I don't divorce myself from it. And then the emotion is there, but I'm not just reacting. So I can acknowledge that I'm happy, I'm joyful, I'm angry, I'm upset, I'm surprised. I actually get a richer vocabulary for my emotional life by taking that moment. Then I can ask myself, even and as a part of that, what do I want out of this? What are my desires here, so I don't lose sight of them? So knowing what I want and knowing what I feel, I can ask myself, now what do I think? What do these data points help me make my choice to be? Without that, I'll just get lost in my thoughts, and my thoughts will be, nobody loves me, nobody cares, I'm isolated, I'm by myself, they don't like me. I'll start making assumptions about people and their thoughts, and I am out of touch with what I really want to be doing with my life. So that deep breath, so that I come out of a compartmentalized self to know what I want and what I feel and what I think. That is what's going to help me build and maintain perspective and function as an integrated person rather than just a surprised one or just an angry one or just a lustful one or just a consumer or just an afraid person. And so many people are bloody
Mhm.
afraid.
Mhm. 1000%. 1000%. So, again, this is a great place for us to stop, take some notes, do some reflection, right? Three questions that we want to focus on right now that you can ask yourself, right? Number one, what are you feeling? Mark talked to us about being in tune with your spirit. It's important to know what's going on inside of you, right? What do I want out of this? Clarity. We got to
Mhm.
be clear about where we're going, right? What are we looking towards? That's where hope can come in. And then I love this one. What do I think? Often I talk to others about that stinking thinking that sometimes resides within us, right? We can
Yeah.
blame everybody else for a lot of things, but there's some things we cannot blame anybody else for. We can't blame anybody else for our own belief. And sometimes we create stories and scenarios in our minds that are not real, but we get so fixated on it, and then it has an impact on everything else, right? So, Mark, thank you so much for sharing that with us. Okay, last question. I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that there are leaders right now who are watching and who are listening. They've heard this whole conversation and they're all in. Yet there's some fear about how do I do this for real, right? So, what would you say to the leader right now who's struggling to let go, whether it's let go of control, let go of the fact that they have been invested, they have built things up from the ground up, and they're afraid to let go, to step aside, to step back, or to let someone else in? Mm.
An interesting way to come at that question is to ask that person what it is. We're going to go right back to what do you want? And to begin to draw that out, because at this point, especially these leaders who've been in their role for more than a decade, maybe more than 2 decades, they have some sense of what they want to be about. And to get that in front of them and to look at what the blocks are, at this point, it's going to be rather individualized. It's not going to just be the same thing for everyone. The category of what they're facing might be very similar from person to person, but how it would be carried out in their family, with their team, in their industry, given the context that they're in, the moment that the marketplace is providing to them, the team that they have, the what they ultimately want to do with their estate, that's going to become a unique recipe. So to begin to map out, what do you want long term, what do you want when you're done, and how are we going to move in that direction, that begins to matter. It becomes a very significant conversation. And what makes people afraid is that they've been kicking that down the road all along, because they've
Mhm.
been more focused on reactionary kinds of leadership and short-term leadership. They keep postponing this longer map for where they want to end up. It feels like a luxury or a perk when they finally have time, when they finally have enough money. That's never going to happen. They have to build it in. It's not impossible to do it later in the game, but we actually
Mhm.
have to have that very significant conversation, create a map, and it's going to become an individual recipe at that point. Do we have 3 years? Do we have 5 years? Do you want to give this to your children? Do you want to sell this to your employees? Do you want to sell it? Do you want to close up shop and sell off the parts? What ultimately do you want to do? And in support of what do you want? Oh, you don't know what you want. You don't have a life to go to yet. Well, then we
Mm.
have another ingredient that we've got to begin to work at, is how to have this life that you can imagine that you'd like to give yourself to.
Mhm.
Otherwise, you're not going to let go. And here's an analogy that I love, I find very useful. When we start out as leaders and we're growing and we're learning, we're embracing with our whole heart, our whole self, this enterprise.
Mhm.
If we don't learn how to let go and let others, that embrace will
Mercy.
become a chokehold. The
Mercy.
very thing that was giving life to the enterprise becomes the death grip. And it's the
Mm.
same person in the same embrace, not
Mm.
letting go. And that means we got to pry our hands off, have open hands, open heart, the possibility of some failure on the way to success, the giving
Mm.
other people a chance to try. We won't do that if we
Mm.
haven't figured out where we ourselves are going, and that becomes an individualized plan with that person, with
Mm,
someone walking beside them that loves them.
mhm,
They know that they can trust that person, that person's
mhm.
got their back, that they've got a thinking partner. That's the process that begins to unlock that.
Have mercy. So as you've been talking, I'm thinking about this. Letting go doesn't mean disappearing. It means
That's right.
shifting your focus from control to trust. Oh, this has
Beautiful.
been so rich. I don't want to stop. My goodness. And to our listeners, our last point of reflection. If you stepped aside tomorrow, what would you want people to say continued because of your influence, not in spite of it? Your
Oh,
influence,
isn't that
how you showed up.
beautiful?
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so I know that there are listeners and viewers that want to engage with you, right? We always invite our listeners and our viewers to reach out to our guests, let them know that they've seen and heard the podcast, and to ask questions and or to tap into the resources that the guests are offering. So, if as our viewers want to engage with you, how can someone do that?
Well, we like to keep that simple. So we've got the domain that goes with my name. So
Mhm,
markelvincent.com. If you go to tealvincententerprises.com, that's the platform on which I do my work. My wife and I have built that together, and you'll find a link to markelvincent.com. And at the one that's under my name, it's a gateway to a number of written or video kinds of resources. It's a place where somebody can start to engage me in conversation. One thing I'll mention that's a free thing that I really like, and we've just made a decision to keep it free because we're now starting to develop a Substack with some subscription for some deeper resources. But I love to write this little LinkedIn newsletter called Executive Thinking. And a person can
mhm,
go there and subscribe to it. It's like a 2-minute read, trying to get at some of these more soulful questions that leaders ask. I say, this is the stuff that I think about in the middle of the night. This is the stuff
mhm,
that wakes me up and I'm turning over and trying to make sense of it and try to keep it lighthearted, even though we're talking about some serious things, and really build out that distinction between executive leadership as an integrated person and not just this reactionary managerial operational
mhm.
part of our life.
I love it. I love it. So there you have it, Transformation Station community. The website is here. You will see his other links in the description box. He has free resources, right? Being able to tap into his 2 minute a day perspectives. We want you to engage and also contact him and let him know that you saw, you heard this podcast episode, right? We're talking about legacy and succession. Mark, thank you so much for joining
Pleasure.
us today. It has been a pleasure and honor to have you here as our guest today.
My pleasure as well. I'm glad I could support what you're wanting to do with Transformation Station.
Thank you so much. Well, listen, this has been absolutely rich. I want to thank you for tuning into Transformation Station. Remember, succession, it is not just about who comes after you, it's about the legacy that you leave behind. If today's episode inspired you, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss the conversations that matter. Share this episode with someone who's building their own legacy, and let's keep on transforming together.